Thanks for tuning in to IoT Connect, where we're covering some of the most interesting topics, trends, and news around the Internet of Things. IoT Connect is brought to you by Teal, a wholly owned, patented eSIM platform that connects any IoT device to any network around the world. Now, I'm excited to welcome you all to this episode of IoT Connect. If you're like us and you're passionate about IoT, be sure to click that like button and hit that subscribe button below so you don't miss a beat. Today, I'm very excited to welcome Brian Deutsch and Glenn Lurie to the show. Brian is the CEO of Pivotal Commware and leads an incredible team at the forefront of next generation communications using holographic beamforming to harness and direct radio waves to maximize spectrum efficiency and broadband data throughput. Glenn most recently was the president, CEO, and board member at Synchronoss Technologies. Prior to Synchronoss, Glenn served as the president and CEO of AT&T's mobility and consumer operations, where he successfully grew AT&T into one of the nation's leading wireless consumer businesses. Today, Glenn is a partner at Stormbreaker VC, serves on the board of Avis Budget Group, Teal, and Pivotal, just to name a few. Thank you both for being on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, this first question is for Brian. Brian, maybe you can give us a little insight into your background and the founding story behind Pivotal.
Absolutely, Rob. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. And, kind of trained classically as an electrical engineer, worked at NASA, worked at Motorola. So a great kind of telecom and wireless background. And, what happened was, kind of two veins converged here. One of them in the millimeter wave broadband wireless access world. I was a founder, eventually entrepreneurism bit me. And it's a birth defect that Glenn and I share. And it's, once it's got you, it's got you. And so when I left Motorola, I've done several startups and pretty good track record as far as that's concerned. So I had one in the 90s, broadband wireless access, especially for millimeter wave, was born. Basically, a service called LMDS, a local multi-point distribution service. And that functioned over millimeter wave. So it was kind of like fiber in the sky. And, I built systems or co-founded a company called Wavetrace that built systems using that point to multi-point millimeter wave technology, first of their kind, actually. And what was funny was LMDS kind of fizzled out, and we did well. I sold the company to Harris Corporation, and so it was a win for myself and my investors, but and my partners and team. But the reason really it fizzled out was because of some of the unarticulated and some of the articulated problems of millimeter wave. It's very much a line of sight technology. It has a hard time penetrating buildings, foliage loss, rain fade, all these other fun things. And what that means is you need to be very directive with those signals. You need to put as much wood behind every arrow as you possibly can. And to do that, you need great beamforming technology. Wasn't there at the time. So lo and behold, time passes 20 years. And I run into a colleague that I worked at NASA with 35 years ago. And he says, hey, you're probably the right guy to take a look at this for me. We have a nascent technology. Bill Gates is helping to fund it. And it's coming out of the ground. And it uses kind of a breakthrough in electromagnetic physics we call metamaterials. But when you boil it all down, it's a better, faster, cheaper, and cost, size, weight, and power consumption way to do beamforming against the more classical means like phased arrays and things like that have been around since World War II. And so there really hasn't been, much of a breakthrough in innovation in that field. So took a look at it. Well, immediately, corners of my mouth kind of curled up because I knew the killer app for this was the one that I had left 20 years ago. And this was the technology we were waiting for, actually, in order to pull this forward. Now, this was whiteboard technology. So I had to go whiteboard, kind of to breadboard, and then kind of a reduction to practice. And we were fortunate enough to do this inside an incubator called Invention Science Fund, which was inside a bigger fund at Intellectual Ventures. And again, as I said, Bill was actually an investor, but more than an investor, he shares our passion for really the art and the science of what we do. but also the game-changing nature of not just beamforming, but the communications technologies that it actually pulls forward. So from that perspective, you know, he was a true believer right from the beginning and has been ever since. So when we started bringing it out of the ground, we were looking at air to ground, we were looking at all places in the spectrum. But meanwhile, my focus never really left millimeter wave. And the reason was I saw that the FCC was, you know, soon to announce that they were going to open that spectrum up for broadband. And also knew very well that broadband wireless access, which is now in the form of fixed wireless access, which has now just exploded, especially in the United States, and is really far and away kind of the leading growth vector for all the mobile network operators, has taken off. And, you know, as we'll talk about in a bit here, millimeter wave will actually be the capacity ballast that makes that ship continue to float and go forward. So, you know, from that perspective, you know, the technology was perfect for that. So we spun out, you know, Bill is a busy guy. And he deserved a board seat. And I asked him if whether or not we could proxy his board seat. And he said, "Who do you have in mind?" And I said, "Well, there's a guy named Glenn Lurie who's pretty infamous in the business and somewhat famous maybe even." And and so, you know, I wanted to try and go get him if that's okay with you. And he said, "Oh, absolutely. That's the right thing to do." So went on a little recruiting trip. A common friend of ours, who's also on the Pivotal board, Kyle Pickens, kind of curated us together up in the mountains, actually up in Montana. We're locked into the snow there. And so Glenn and I immediately hit it off. And obviously, you know, I've always called Glenn, you know, the Kevin Bacon of telecom. He's there's nobody who's more than 1 degree separated from Glenn, and which is great. But he also has very unique insights because he started in that business selling cell phones. And, you know, when I first heard his story, you know, it floored me. But it was really literally the guy coming out of the mailroom making it to CEO. It was unbelievable. And all the bumps and grinds along the way. But it's because Glenn not only has incredible focus, and passion, you know, but he likes to win. He's a great competitor. In fact, I came back, last thing I'll say, turn it over to Glenn maybe, is I came back from this trip and I'm telling the rest of the board members, yeah, we got to get this guy. This guy's amazing. And, you know, not only does he know the space really well, but he's going to have a passion for the same vision we do. And he probably told me 10 or 11 stories from his childhood, and about 8 of them ended in a fist fight. And I think he won them all. And he won them all too. And it's just because he's competitive, and I love that. But beyond that, he knows how to win. So from that perspective, and we've just become great friends since then.
Absolutely. Appreciate that, Brian. And Rob, thanks for having me. By the way, I do want to point out to everybody, I'm wearing my Pivotal shirt. And I'm wearing my Teal hat since I'm on Teal's board. So I'm here with 2 of my favorite companies. No, I would just add to what Brian's saying. You know, when you put your carrier hat on for a second, I think we all understand that millimeter wave was auctioned off all over the world. Carriers spent a lot of billions on it, a lot of money on it. And candidly, many have still not used it for a whole host of reasons. But one of the keys is what Brian talked about. It's the level of spectrum it doesn't penetrate buildings. You have foliage issues. You have all kinds of issues. So when I met Brian and he started explaining to me what they were doing and what their end goal was, and the tech that they had built, it was very hard not to get excited. Because you know, a lot of people were back then, this is almost 5 years ago, were still writing stories that millimeter wave will never be worth anything. Now, let's be clear. I've been in the wireless business for a long time. I'm an old guy, you know, 30 plus years. I've never seen a piece of spectrum that's worthless ever. Right? Technology always finds a place for everything. And so when I met Brian, and obviously Kyle's a very good friend and business associate of both of ours, and then I talked with Bill and the Bill's team, it was a pretty easy decision to join and join Brian and team. And it's been a run. It's been a ride. But I think when you really step back and look at now people starting to look at millimeter wave and saying, yes, we can use this for FWA. We can use this for different applications. You know, Pivotal has, if not the best tech, some of the best tech in the world in this area.
So you mentioned FWA. What is FWA? Why is it important? How does growing FWA coverage benefit operators? And why do operators want to grow FWA coverage?
So, you know, fixed wireless access is really the foil to the cable monopoly or the copper monopoly. And it's come out of the ground and done something that I'd never seen, like Glenn. I'm 30 plus years in telecom. And I've absolutely never seen a growth vector for a new technology similar to what this has done. So I would say maybe 18 months ago, maybe 20 months ago, T-Mo and then Verizon started selling fixed wireless access. Okay, so I mean, I don't know if you can actually even wrap your mind around this, right? So there's 0% penetration in the broadband scheme of things, 0%. Okay, now they've 90% of every broadband net add is through those two companies.
Wow.
On wireless. Okay, so you know what's on the other side of that? The entire universe of cable, the entire universe of fiber, and the entire universe of copper. That's 10%. This is 90%. So T-Mo's up over 4 million subscribers now, and Verizon's nipping at their heels. That's great. That's a great growth vector. And you can see where it's really helping in so many ways. Obviously, it's helping to break the hegemony that cable has had, the kind of stranglehold it's had on a lot of people, and offer a competitive service. And they can do it in a very lightweight way, right? They're not ripping up roads and streets. It's fiber through the air. And it's amazingly fast. And we were talking about SLAs that start at 300 megabits. And they go up from there into the gigabit speed. So from that perspective, it's really hit the mark also. So now you're starting to see the likes of Verizon, the likes of T-Mobile, when they do their quarterly report, they come out, one of the first things they talk about is the up and to the right growth vector of fixed wireless access, because let's face it, you know, mobility, they're just kind of stealing subscribers from one another. So they trade them back and forth. This is a new growth area. So this is hundreds of over $100 billion a year that cable's kind of had a lock on, that now you can see cable starting to retreat from. So it's been wonderful from that aspect. But now the issue is that a lot of the spectrum, the early spectrum they were using was mid-band spectrum. And the problem is that mid-band spectrum, I don't know if you remember, about a year and a half ago, they auctioned off C-band. $80 billion for that C-band spectrum. They paid just an enormous amount of money for that, about $1.10 to $1.50 per megahertz pop for that spectrum.
Whoa.
And there's a couple hundred megahertz of it, right? So millimeter wave, there's gigahertz of it, right? So every band has about 800 megahertz, and there's 3 different bands. So over 2.5 gigahertz of spectrum that's available in millimeter wave, and they paid about anywhere from a penny to maybe 10 cents per megahertz pop for that spectrum. Now, come back to fixed wireless and look at the cost dynamics and the unit economics there. So you have a situation where on my cell phone, when you deliver a gigabit to me, and I consume probably 15 gigabits a month on my cell phone, and when you give me a gigabit, you charge me about $4.50 per gigabit. At my house, I'm going 500 gigabits a month, and not 15, 500, up to a terabit per month. And you're going to make maybe a dime per gigabit off of that. So now you have this situation where all of a sudden you're sucking down this valuable spectrum and you're not making as much money on it. And that spectrum is definitely needed in order to really function inside the world of mobility. And you have this great spectrum sitting out here, millimeter wave. The problem was, as Glenn had pointed out, and I pointed out earlier, is that there were some, you know, again, well-articulated, but then unarticulated problems with the spectrum. And the very first one was, it's not low-band spectrum. So it's not supposed to just light up a polygon with 4 bars, call root metrics, let's go. It's not that spectrum. The idea behind millimeter wave is find the pockets where people are, right? A multi-dwelling unit or a condo, perhaps an arena, those types of things where the hotspots are, where these people are going to consume a copious amount of bandwidth and capacity and light those up. So you do it, with very deterministically and very targeted. And what's neat about that, for the first time ever, this is a new paradigm in Glenn's world, is that, carriers used to say, oh, here comes another G. Glenn would go, write another $20 billion check for the next G. And then now, fortunately, subscriber base would jump up a little bit because you get new data services, or that ain't happening anymore, right? So 4G to 5G, you got a little better of this. You got some private networking, you got network slicing, MEC, and some things like that. But you're not going to get a ton more subscriber growth. So the whole idea here is that, well, you better find a way to raise ARPU now because you just spent that money. So what's great about millimeter wave is you're able to actually go out and look and say, hey, let's spend a little bit of money. Let's improve the edge of the network, the wireless edge of the network, so that we can take that millimeter wave, those problems of millimeter wave, and then dissect them, pull that ball of yarn apart, and light up all the buildings, all the multi-dwelling units in downtown Houston.
Yeah.
And let's spend that money very judiciously, and then let's make revenue. And then let's spend a little more, and then let's make more revenue, spend a little more. It's kind of a neat gambit. We feel we cracked the code.
Yeah, and I'll add is this again. I'll take my carrier hat back on for a second, my teal hat on. What Brian just went through is really critically important when you dissect each of the carrier's assets, right? And I'm talking assets as in fiber assets. I'm talking assets as in spectrum assets, and I'm talking about obviously where FWA makes sense. And so you heard, T-Mo and Verizon have been very loud about it. AT&T has made comments about it. AT&T spending billions of dollars on fiber right now. But ultimately, when you step back and look, this is about bundling. This is about being offensive and defensive at the same time. And so when you think about it, Rob, if you're a T-Mo customer, right, and you love T-Mo service and great, but they don't offer broadband in your neighborhood, and all of a sudden Verizon comes flying in and says, hey, not only do we have both, not only do we have quality of service, but we're going to give you a discount because you have two services with us. I would imagine that would make T-Mobile very nervous, which is why you're seeing them dive into FWA. And by the way, just remember, FWA, it's much cheaper homes passed than going pure fiber. Now, you need fiber in a network. Let me just be clear. Fiber is very, very, very important. But once you have fiber, I'll pick on even a little bit on rural America. Brian gave an example of Houston. I'll give an example of rural Texas. And you have fiber down Maine, and you have an opportunity to light up a whole community. What are you going to use to light that community up? Are you going to go fiber to prem in a big community and spend $2,000 a home pass? Or are you going to use FWA where, and I'll use a number, Brian will probably disagree with me, it might be a few $100s a home pass.
That's the number.
Yeah. So all of a sudden the economics change, right? And also let's remember, we're talking about what Pivotal can do in this particular situation is deliver, 300 plus kind of speeds up to multi-gigabit. And if you go to rural America, most of them don't have that choice. They don't have a provider that can do that. So now you're starting to you're kind of throwing a rock and getting two birds with one stone, right? You're creating the ability to bundle. You're going to places you currently are not, incremental revenue, right? And if you just happen to have a competitor doing the same thing, you're blocking from making sure your churn doesn't go up. So there's a whole multi ways of thinking through this as a carrier. And I'm talking about the US carriers right now. There's no difference in Canada. There's no difference. You pick a country in the world, and FWA is going to play a role in that country.
Oh, you think, Glenn, that was incredible. And you're you're so on the money on the bundling play because, you look, the carriers fight each other for that bundling play, but they're also now having to fight Comcast for it because they have the MVNO capability. So if they get aced out of the home, the US, I think it was Jonathan Chaplin and I had a discussion about this one time and from New Street, and he had said this was actually the big news of FWA because he's British, very British actually, and he had said that we think very provincially that everybody's like America. The rest of the world is not like America. The rest of the world buys everything from one source. Telefonica, Vodafone, whoever it is, they buy it from one source. And that's going to happen in the United States. So if the MNOs are not in the home, what's going to happen? They're on the sidewalk. So they absolutely need that vector in order to go forward.
Absolutely.
I mean, it sounds like it's going to be a land grab, and it sounds like things are ramping so quickly. I mean, we talk about, multifamily homes, the edge. Where else do you see this going? I mean, you earlier you mentioned, stadiums and other types of use cases. Are there any other places you see this going?
Let me start this one. And Brian, I want you to react to this because obviously we've had this conversation. There's a lot of things about 5G that are being written right now that are negative. And one of the reasons they're being written is that, wait a second, the carriers spent all these billions of dollars, but really haven't gotten the incremental revenue that they expected to get from spending that money. And by the way, let me be really clear. That's a bad thing. It's a bad thing for America. It's a bad thing for infrastructure because, the three CEOs, John, Hans, and Mike are sitting in their offices every day going, wait a second, how can I keep spending all this money if I can't get a fair return for my investments? And so when you start to step back, I think a couple of things that really haven't come to fruition that I think really need to. First is private networks. I mean, private networking is so important, being discussed by everybody, whether it's Nokia, Ericsson, you name it. And candidly, we haven't really got there yet, right? I was at a conference recently in Seattle. I was speaking on the VC part of a mobility conference. That was kind of fun for me and a little bit new for me. And I actually listened to the Costco CIO say he's been looking for a solution for his warehouses where he can have his own experience in private networks for a year and still hasn't found one that works. Think about that. That's a big deal. And people say, well, how is that? Well, number one, it's very difficult to switch from a macro network, right, to a private network. And Rob, you as Teal's VP of marketing know well, Teal has that solution, right? So that's kind of one piece of this, and we're really proud of what Teal can do there. From Brian's perspective, he's saying, wait a second, I'll use millimeter wave. I'm not even going to touch the valuable spectrum that the MNOs need to use for their mobile customers. I'm going to bring in you spectrum you have sitting on the shelf, and I'm going to deliver an amazing, private LTE, private 5G, whatever term you want to use, network for somebody on a campus, somebody in a stadium, somebody in a warehouse, you name it. And then together, you can think about how the power of bringing that together. And now your device doesn't even ask you a question. It just sees that private network as just another network. That phone, that device, that phone, that IoT device, that car, that truck can just switch to. That's the kind of stuff that gets me fired up because we really haven't, the carriers, I don't believe, have reaped the benefit of that yet. And I can give you other examples. Brian, react to that one. That gets a good. They
will. And the catalyst for what where Glenn's going with that, especially in private networking, realistically, is the whole idea of mobile edge compute. And so when you look at cloud structure and the way cloud compute works and the costs that are inherent in cloud compute, right? So I'm in a stadium and I get scanned by a fancy millimeter wave scanner, that looks for weapons and contraband on my body. Now that is just a ton of data that needs to go somewhere. Now, are you going to send that all the way back to some cloud in Iowa, Eastern Washington, wherever, or and which is going to be very expensive and take a ton of time, a ton of latency. A guy's going to have to stand there and wait, and and it turns out he has a plate in his head or something, and they freeze him up and throw him against the wall, whatever. So what this is where mobile edge and the wireless edge start to merge. So what happens is you have these scanners all over T-Mobile Park, and these scanners have a lot of data coming in, a lot of data coming out. Well, where they're going is to a mobile edge compute that's on-prem. It's actually on-prem. Can you use Wi-Fi to do that? Oh, hell no, you can't use Wi-Fi for that, right? Wi-Fi is being used by everybody in the stadium for whatever kind of garbage they're using it for. It's got no latency. I mean, it's got super high latency, no availability. The throughput is could be up, down, sideways, whatever. No, you need a private network in order to do that. So you overlay a millimeter wave, or for that matter, even a CBRS private network over top of that. And now you have a situation where that private network can actually act as the comms network inside T-Mobile Park for their own communications network. Super high security, by the way, because 3GPP made it so, right? So now you have that situation happening, and you have this perfect overlay of the wireless edge, this little millimeter wave intra-network that's working inside T-Mobile Park, but also, the mobile compute. So the mobile compute thing now, every once in a while, metadata is going to get bundled up and sent back to the server somewhere in the sky, because there's this metadata contains things that AI needs to chew on. That guy has a fake leg, this guy has a weird belt buckle, whatever it is that they need to actually assess and try to realign their algorithms with. Sure, that's got to go back. So you have that confluence of the two, just like you have the confluence of the wireless edge and the wide area network. So, right, coming from the base station, the RAN, as we call it, right? So you have those two situations working in concert with each other. So, that's really our focus. Our focus is at Pivotal is to continue to be the company that shows leadership in building out what we call the wireless edge, and how that edge actually, again, synthesizes with the compute edge.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add is do you have a quick Teal commercial? You have to be able to put a SIM, eSIM, iSIM, we can go through all kinds of terminology, in a device that allows it to actually, utilize those networks seamlessly. We used to, back in the AT&T days, we called it, I called it, and it got coined, unconscious connectivity. Customers don't care what network they're on, it just needs to work. Right. And think about that when you walk into a stadium or you walk into a facility. You think about some of these campuses that they want their own experience, right? When that employee walks on the campus, I'm not going to pick on any big companies, but we can name numerous, and they want that experience to be a private network, local experience. That is where we're headed. And look, I applaud the carriers for their investments. It's fantastic. And what they're doing is so important for our whole being, our whole lives. Everything's wireless, everything's connected. But we've got to start to bring these things together to deliver these experiences that Brian and I are talking about.
Well, I mean, it's their spectrum, it's their phones, it's their network slice, right? So all that has to seamlessly work together, and absolutely right down to the trip of the authentication and the eSIM, for whatever that device is that they're bringing in. The nice part, like the case I mentioned with this millimeter wave kind of overlording, you have a situation where it's being used as, kind of a controlled Wi-Fi and steroids. That's great. But now you have millimeter wave in the whole stadium, and a ton of people, you got millions of people walking around the United States with phones that can consume millimeter wave. So now they're coming in to the stadium and they want the experience, that augmented reality experience they've done, like Verizon did at the Super Bowl, where you could hold your phone up, put the camera on, load the app, and it would show stats over every player's head, and and how they did for the day, and this, that, and the other. So it's those types of experiences and network slices that you'll start to see carriers actually making, quite a bit of money on. And of course, it's their spectrum too. Yeah,
agreed.
I mean, I can remember going to Seahawks games and not even be able to get a text message out back in the day.
I remember it too, because I was working at AT&T and we heard a lot about it. And I think all three carriers have solutions now built into stadiums, and a lot. It's amazing. I remember we were engaged back in the day when in Atlanta they were building Mercedes Stadium out, and Arthur Blank wanted it absolutely state of the art. You can look at Cowboy Stadium, which is absolutely state of the art. They have their own networks built into those stadiums, like Brian's talking about. And you're talking about a lot of money, but it's so important for that customer to be able to get that experience that they want to have in that stadium, whether they're watching a football game, a soccer game, or a concert. They all can have these wonderful experiences. I believe destinations are all going to have their own experiences at some point, whether you walk into a Costco, right? And now you can think about how they can treat their customer. You walk into your campus at work, if you go to work, or if you're working at home, you think about all the different things that can happen. Those are the things when the vision of IoT, the vision of wireless changes our lives. It changes our experiences, and we get to have the experiences that we want. And then you throw AI and ML on top, and you throw all these other things that it starts to get pretty interesting.
And VR and AR, right? So augmented
course.
reality, on a Google Glass type situation where I walk into Home Depot and I say, "Guy, where the heck is this, Canuter valve?" And I can, and I can hold it up in front of my camera, and it just wayfinds me right to it, and those types of things. So, and with reviews and everything else, and how to use it, and videos from YouTube, and everything else I need. So yeah, that's all that the carriers can actually get themselves right infused in that. They won't necessarily own it, but they'll be the purveyors of it. And so this is that return on investment, I think, that Glenn's talking about. Yeah. Absolutely. There is something else interesting. Glenn, we have a common friend, Tim Courtney, who likes to opine on the wireless world. And Tim said something to me today that he's experiencing in his side of the business with FWA is that, and I'm going to put this in my vernacular. Part of my pitch nowadays is I tell people when I start out any pitch, I say food, water, shelter, broadband. Those are all in the same group now. Okay, they all share the same Venn diagram space now. And in fact, you'll chintz on your latte once a week to get better broadband if you have to, right? So they're really in the same pod. And what's interesting about that is it's starting to become a 5.9 service. You've got your Ring doorbell, you've got things at your house that, if either the internet or power, but power is not as bad because they're battery backed up. But if the internet goes out, all of a sudden your burglar alarm doesn't function correctly, and your Ring doorbell doesn't function correctly. So a lot of the cable guys and other guys are starting to look at fixed wireless even as a backup service, just to say, I got to give 5.9s to humans now on internet. You can't have your internet out. You can't have your fiber cut. And you're going to see this a lot, for sure. And, obviously, the IoT world's been way ahead of this for years. And, had, wired if it's necessary, right, for the coping bandwidth, and then wireless otherwise. And which, by the way, nice melding of Pivotal and Teal is in that really high capacity IoT space where you have to use millimeter wave.
Yeah. Brian, yeah. Look, I just got to add this. You nailed something that I was having this conversation this morning, that trying to explain to an investor that, the only way of the future is devices can never be off network. And any device, right? A Ring doorbell or is attached to your door, your refrigerator, whatever the device is. But when you start talking about automobiles and not having the ability to call E911 when they have an accident, which today, again, I was in this business for a long time. Most automobiles are a single carrier, right? And again, if a single carrier has a hiccup and network goes down, or a single carrier, something goes, that car, or you go out in the middle of nowhere in camp, and you're done. And in the future, you can't be done. I would argue today you can't be done, right? So that means you start bringing in satellite networks that are attached. The global stars of the world and others, because reality is that. And again, you think about Teal's platform. One of the things Teal has is it's every network, and we are working with satellite companies. So with one SIM, you can have access to every network. Now you put that in your vehicle, in your, you name it, whatever you want to call it. There's so many opportunities for it. Now no matter what, you can never not be in a place you have network. And that is the future of IoT. It's the future of everything. And it's something that we got to get there. And right now, today, we're getting there. We're working with the right people. We're going to get there. But that's got to be super important to any device manufacturer in the world.
I mean, we're talking about the edge, satellite communications, and one thing that comes to mind for me is the DoD, and what are the military applications for this? Because they've got to be using private networks on their bases, remote bases, on the edge, et cetera.
They absolutely do, and millimeter wave especially. And the reason is because all the baggage that people throw at millimeter wave, right? God, it only goes in straight lines and doesn't bounce off things. It doesn't really go super far. And it's such a high frequency, you have to really aim it in a tight pattern. Well, that's kind of music to the ears of the military, right? You know, you're in a theater and you have drones going out, let's say, and you have to set this theater up immediately. It has to be up in 20 minutes, ready to go. ComSec needs to go. And then the drones go out, right? Those drones are coming back with LiDAR data, visual data, heat maps, all the other fun stuff. They have some satellite imagery that they're popping down and getting in. Also, they're talking to each other. They're talking to ground forces. So, you know, that's super essential. And so the nice part, again, by the way, commercial for holographic beamforming, that low power, we can solar power, you know, battery generator. You can do this, and we've done it. You know, we've set up in Quantico and some other bases also. But when you take that power to go out into the field, so now you have this copious capability. By the way, a lot of this is uplink. Uplink is, you know, the future, right? Everybody talks about what's my download speed. Well, as soon as you put a camera on something or LiDAR or a lot of sensors, IoT guys know this, you know, now all of a sudden uplink matters. And millimeter wave, again, is spectacular for uplink because you can get those 100 megabit uplink speeds, you know, if that's if that's what's necessary and that's where you need to go. So yeah, the military's just gone crazy for it. And the whole idea of low probability detection, low probability of intercept of a signal that's, you know, super tight beam that can only go so far and isn't going to go way beyond the hill and that someone's listening to is, you know, music to their ears.
So we're talking about these antenna techniques, you know, holographic beamforming. Can you talk about the intelligent beam management system and why it's important?
Yeah, so I mean, for us, everything we put out into the field has IBMS in it. It's in the intelligent beam management system, and we did that because, you know, it's an IoT device, right? And we have an IoT modem in every, you know, and I'm sure some of them have eSIMs in them, you know, from Teal also. And I mean, for us, you know, usually it's carrier network by carrier network. But what we need to do is we need to make sure that when you have a battle theater set up, and I mean this in the more pedestrian vernacular, not in the military vernacular, but when you've kind of set up your wireless battleground of I'm gonna, you know, saturate that building, that arena, and, you know, maybe that university campus with millimeter wave, you have to make sure you get 5 nines running there also. So on the fly, you need to continuously optimize that network. So we're always taking KPIs back and forth to say, hey, can we formulate a better beam? Is there blockage now? Did something happen? Did, you know, somebody hit a pole? Did a giant truck come and park in front of something? Now we have to actually have redundancy to be able to have failover to go off. And then also, you know, you're gonna eventually get to the point where you need to load balance, because even though millimeter wave can throw out just gigabits of data, 5 years from now, gigabits won't be enough. So you're going to need multiple gigabit shots. So we'll be talking all of a sudden, you know, our link, right, or whatever our sector beam is that we're talking on, will get too overloaded and we'll need to come in from another vector. And so we'll have to switch dynamically over to that vector also. So, you know, there's a lot to what we can do there. On fixed wireless access, we can also do kind of what we call parent-child relationships. I didn't really get into the nitty-gritty of how Pivotal does what Pivotal does, but we have elements in the field. So we have hardware elements in the field, network elements that actually take and redirect the signal around. Rather than recreating it, we just grab it and we redirect it around obstacles. That's what we do. And we use a technology that's in a cloud format, you know, a cloud native format called Wavescape. And Wavescape has, you know, AI and ML that can go out and ingest, you know, very high resolution LiDAR data that's taken, you know, aerially and from oblique angles. So it digests this, it builds a digital twin of the scenario, and then it'll find out all the possible vectors. And then that synthesizes with IBMS to find out what the best vector is and how to fail over to a different vector if that's necessary, or how to optimize the one you're on.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, guys. Again, I really appreciate you being on the show. Before we wrap things up, anything else you guys want to add?
No, great job, Brian, as always. Rob, thanks for having us. I think we got into some pretty cool areas. But, you know, I'll just say, there is so much opportunity with early stage and mid stage companies that are in the wireless and connectivity space. You know, when I first met Brian, obviously Brian just completed a very impressive D round that was led by some very, very well-known folks, including Gates and Cerberus and others. And again, when you go back and Brian knows what's going on with you guys at Teal and everything else, there is just so much opportunity out there. And I'm really excited about the overall space, but I'm also excited about the receptance we're seeing from the carriers and the big players as well. It's really fantastic.
And the investment community. So yeah, we're both very fortunate, I think, Teal and Pivotal in that regard. And I'm a big fan, a big Teal fan. And I've known, Michael and Robbie and Rob met you, and of course Sid and we share Glenn. I think sometimes you get too much of them. So I'm jealous. I'm jealous. So
we are.
But no, and I don't have much more to add except that it would be fun to do this a year from now and see how far it's gone.
You guys are welcome back anytime. And for our viewers, if you're like us and you are enthusiastic about what you're hearing on the show, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel so you can tune into future shows. And thank you both for being on the show. I really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Anytime, Rob. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Talk to you soon. Thanks, Rob.